Nick Cave's box set, Lost Treasures. Hi, welcome to Garage Geek. Today, I am going to respond to Ben Rankin's challenge of showing my favorite albums per decade. And I'm going to start with the 60s and go through the end of the century, which will be the 1990s. Now, after going through my album collection extensively, I've decided that there's one box set that I listen to more than anything else. And it just so happens, coincidentally, that there are 4 albums in this box set, and each album is from a different decade. So I'm going to focus on this box set, and I'm going to let you in on why I think that this box set represents the latter half of the decade and why you should be listening to this lost classic. Now, this box set was released for about 5 minutes on the MOFI website, and subsequently it was never made available. I am a true Nick Cave fan, and I was not able to get my hands on this box set. Now, how do you know I'm a true Nick Cave fan? Because I have bid for this box set every single time it's come up on eBay, and I have the screenshots to prove it. Recently, I've been watching the series of videos put out by Robert Zee where he goes through all of his MOFI, and he showed an unopened copy of this MOFI box set, and I couldn't believe it. My jaw dropped. Number one, he has this box set, and number two, he refuses to open it and listen to it. It's just sitting there when an Uber fan like myself could be enjoying the sounds coming from my stereo instead of having to experience this album digitally. That's a sin, Robert Zee. Now, you say that when you're 65, you're going to sell this probably for about $5,000, I think was the price that you quoted. I'm already starting to save, but I know there's a couple other really strong Nick Cave fans out there who are going to bid against me. But Robert, you need to stick to your price of $5,000, and you need to sell it to me. So now let's jump into this box set. This box set is entitled Nick Cave Will Bore You to Death and Throw Your Body into an Australian Well. I lovingly refer to this album by its initials. Ikawabitadatibiao. Now, the first album starts in the 1960s. Now, Nick Cave was only a child, and by the age of 6, he was going around to studios and he was trying to appear in movies. And although he was never accepted, he was filmed, and there are recordings of what he created during this time period.
Chicken, 'cause I'm from the south, sing polly wolly doodle all a day.
Now, he was never accepted in any of the roles because even though he was so good beating out all the competition, he was just a little too dark for the roles, the sunny roles that the studio wanted. So the films themselves were bleak. The child had to exude lightness to cheer up the population that were going through a difficult time. They were escape movies. And Nick Cave, even though he had the dancing and the singing abilities, he just couldn't pull it off. Trying out for so many roles and not being accepted was a real blow to Nick Cave. But thank goodness we still have the audio and the visual from this time period as an archive, because the first album of this box set really captures the spirit of this amazing artist as a child and shows his growth and potential. So now we're going to move into the 70s. Now, along the way, Nick Cave joined punk bands, and all of that stuff is readily available. In fact, other YouTubers have covered this period extensively. So I won't bother to cover any of that. But there was someone in the 70s who recognized Nick Cave's genius, and that was Robert Fripp. Now, at the time, Robert Fripp was in a band, little-known band, called King Crimson. And he was trying out various musicians on each album. And so he brought in Nick Cave, because he obviously recognized his talent, but their egos clashed. They had very different ideas about what they wanted. Even though there is archival recordings left, it was shelved for so long. And until this MOFI box set, these recordings weren't available. Let's go ahead and listen to a sample of what could have been.
In the
Cave
of the crimson
Now, once Nick Cave realized his contribution to King Crimson wouldn't be acknowledged and would be shelved, this turned him off from collaborating. And so we know what he went on to do. And it wouldn't be until the late 90s, early 2000s that he would collaborate again with people like PJ Harvey. However, this leads us to the 1980s. It took Nick Cave 10 years, but he decided to collaborate again. This time, he joined up with someone whose ideas matched his own. Very dark. So he decided to do an album with Morrissey and the Smiths. However, even Nick Cave's collaboration with Morrissey and the Smiths proved too dark for the Smiths. And they ultimately decided, and the record company, that it needed to be shelved. Now, for the first time on this MOFI box set, we are able to hear the outtakes from these amazing sessions. Thank goodness, because this is my #1 album of the 80s. So that brings us to the final album of this box set. Nick Cave was very experimental, and he's always been very experimental throughout his career. He's gone through many phases: polka, Latin dance, new age, punk. But he decided to take his dark energies in a very new direction in the 90s. And he formed a band called Gargle Cancer. And they explored the deepest, darkest realms of dark music. The lyrics were extremely profane, upsetting, sacrilegious. I mean, these were all the darkest ideas vomited onto paper and then constructed in a sound studio. Now, this album was 20 years ahead of its time. When you hear it now in this MOFI box set, they were light years before Venom, Slayer, and all the top dark metal albums that would come later. Thank goodness we have a record of those studio sessions in this final album of the box set. And it is just such a shame that the record studio didn't have the foresight to release this when Nick Cave worked on it, because this would be an absolute classic today, lauded by every metalhead on every single metal channel. At least we have this. Now, as I've said before, if you are a Nick Cave fan and you have not heard this box set, then you do not know the real Nick Cave. So that is why this box set contains one album per decade. These are the albums I listen to the most. These albums show so much experiment and so much creativity that for them to languish in a studio vault for all these years. But don't get me wrong, I'm so happy that we have these recordings and that MOFI made them available for 5 minutes and that at least they're available on streaming and download. So don't forget, Robert Z, that MOFI box set, Nick Cave Will Bore You to Death and Throw Your Body in an Australian Well, has my name on it. I'm already saving the $5,000, and please don't raise the price. I want to thank you for the support. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the metal community. There are too many of them to name. You know who you are. I want to thank T-Cat's Deep Vinyl Tracks, because I am eagerly awaiting the rest of your King Crimson series. I want to thank Embryonic Robot for his amazing work on the Smiths series. And of course, I need to thank Ben Rankins, who inspired all this, who did an amazing series on Nick Cave, whose catalog I'm actually going to delve more deeper into. Now, of course, I mean no disrespect to Nick Cave. This was all done in fun. And again, I want to thank you all for the support. Nick Cave Will Bore You to Death. I have to say this with a straight face. Nick Cave will bore you to death and throw your body in an Australian well. Wait, I'm still laughing.